Father, we are contemplating a word from on high. We ask, Heavenly Father, that if there is anything that is unlike you, to remove it from our midst. We ask this in your Son's name, do we pray. Amen. Beloved, as I was preparing this sermon, I remembered listening to an interview some time ago on the radio. He asked Jimmy Carter, the former U.S. president, what he thought about the idea that some people were likening Nelson Mandela to Jesus. Did Jimmy Carter agree with him? Jimmy Carter replied, no. Because as a Christian, I believe that Jesus is the divine Son of God, and Mandela was merely a man. Well, that got me to thinking, who do I think Mandela was more like in the scriptures? And it struck me that Mandela in his character had some similarities to John the Baptist. Because he, like John, was a man of integrity. And it was only because Mandela and John the Baptist had integrity that their message could be heard. Both John the Baptist and Nelson Mandela stood for what they believed in, and both landed in prison for it. Mandela was offered a deal to come out of Robben Island earlier than he did, if he would compromise his principles. John the Baptist could have kept his head if he had stopped telling Herod that it was an adultery. He could have compromised to live. But this morning, I would like to take the opportunity to look at John the Baptist. For those who are not familiar with our text today, there is one person who was a very special witness to Jesus Christ, and his name was John the Baptist. And his sole focus was to bear witness to that light. But Jesus said this about John the Baptist. Jesus says, I tell you the truth. Among those born of woman, there has not risen anyone greater than John the Baptist. Powerful words. But in this text today is the purpose of every believer, as Jesus commanded us in the Great Commission. And it bears the same to witness as John did. So I got 3 points, and I realize we have a busy day, and I'm going to go through them. But the first point I want to make is in verse 6. And notice that in the text we now have a transition, because in verses 1 through 5 we were talking about the deity of Christ, how the Word was in the beginning, and Christ was the Word, and now we have a shift. Because the text says, quite frankly, that there was a man, and we have to look at that phraseology, there was a man, because the man, all right, is not deity. And because he was a man, he is equal with each and every one of us. So we're not talking about someone who is comprised of the hypostatic union that we discussed on Thursday nights. We're not talking about that. We're talking about someone who is like you and like me. And so we realize that this man, he wasn't incarnate with God at the beginning. No, this man was birthed the same way that all of us are birthed. And this man will pass and go home to the Lord in the same way that all of us will. And the next thing I want to notice here, all right, in this particular text, is that notice that the man, he was sent. And he was sent from God. And all of us, if we're true to our calling, can relate to this, because all of us are sent from God in the Great Commission. Am I right about it?
Yeah.
So I'm really talking about John, all right, but in a parallel way, I'm speaking about you as well. And so it says that he was sent from God. So if he was sent from God, all right, it means that he was sent from the heart of God. And it also indicates that his mission is from God. It's not from man, it's from God. Am I right about it? And all of us here have to realize at some point in our walk with Christ that our true mission is from God. It's not from man, it is from God. And then the text tells us his name. And we all have a name. My name is Shelton. Your name is what your name is. But this man's name is John. Let me get to the next verse. I got to move on. We realize that John is sent. And I realize I'm opening up this text, but I'm going to be honest with you. I'm talking to you, directly to you. But I have to tell you the truth, okay, because even as I speak, I shut up. And the reason I do is because I'm speaking about such a great man. I know Mandela is a great man, but John the Baptist is even a greater man. John the Baptist has set the temple and the tone for ministry, period. He was chosen to be the forerunner of Christ, and all who would believe would do well to listen on this day. And notice the text says that he came for testimony. And all of us, quite frankly, should have a testimony. I don't understand how Christians today don't have testimonies. I'm perplexed about that. How is it that Christ has come into your life and you don't have a testimony? How is it you do not remember the day or the time you had a genuine encounter with Christ? Or when Christ actually changed your life? I am perplexed about those with no testimony. But then it says, his testimony is to bear witness to that light. Now, we talked last week about Jesus being the light of the world. So his testimony is to bear witness to that light, which is Jesus Christ. And isn't that the same for all of us? Isn't that the reason why we're even in church? Isn't that the reason why we grow? To bear testimony of that light? Too many of us, quite frankly, have failed in that regard. We bear testimony to our traditions. We bear testimony to our philosophies. But we don't bear testimony to that light. But that wasn't John, because you see, John had integrity. And so he bared testimony to that light. And he had a reason. And all of us, quite frankly, should have a reason. During the cares and concerns, we've heard about reasons. We've heard about people who are hurting, who are going through things in this life. And so there's a reason to bear testimony. There's a reason to reach out to people. The truth about the matter is that the world's way is not working. So many are seeking into the philosophy of the world, trying to find light, and there is no light in darkness. And so the reason that John has is the reason that all of us should share in, that all might believe through him. And you should have the same purpose that other people in this world should have opportunity to believe in Jesus Christ through the witness that you share with them. That should be all of our purpose. It shouldn't be just tucked in and locked in a Bible in our homes that only collect dust. No. It should be that all people might believe through him. Illustration, I was having a conversation this week with a young man at my job during the day. And we was talking about all the things that he sees out in the world, and he was sounding like he was full of so much despair. Because when you look out on the world, you don't see a whole lot of positive things. And so I was telling the young man that there is a better way. And he says, oh, I know all about religion, and the wife that I heard about God and everything else like that, but I don't think that's the way. I said, well, maybe you haven't heard about the right way, the way. And he went on to tell me about those who profess to be Christians. He said, I see so many of them out in the world. I see them in the videos. I see them in the stores. I see the rudeness in them. I see their lifestyles. I said, well, how do you know they're Christians? He said, they're wearing crosses. And I told him, well, they might be wearing crosses, may not be Christians. And so Jesus told us that we are the light of the world. And so John bears witness to that light. But you do have to admit that the young man that I was talking with, you do have to admit he's got valid points. But I had to surrender to his thoughts because I knew them to be true. But I couldn't. I didn't have the heart to tell him that it may be true in the world, but sometimes, young man, it's even true right in the church. And so there is much work for us to do. And so we have an example in front of us, and his name is John. And so he bears witness to the light that all might believe through him. And they can't believe through him if he has a witness program that no one wants to be associated with. Am I right about that? We have to stop in this church and in so many other churches. We have to stop being associated just in word only. It has to be a heart thing. It's got to be a heart thing. A transformation has got to take place within our heart. Let me have the last verse. And this speaks of John's greatest asset. It speaks of his humility. Because in reality, you cannot serve Christ unless you have humility. You can't serve at all. Your brother, your sister, you can't serve unless you have humility. Declaring that my way or the highway is not humility. Declaring my way or the highway is selfishness. And that's all it is. And I don't care if it's wearing a robe or where it's at in the church. It's selfishness. But that wasn't John's trait. Notice it, because when the Pharisees came to ask him who was he, and many of us, quite frankly, we like our societal standing. We love titles. And one thing about Americans, different from Europeans, when you ask American, who are you? And the first thing they'll tell you, it will refer to their title or their job or what they do. It's an American trait. And not to the person. But John says that he was not that light. And many of us, quite frankly, have to take that mindset, especially in the church. We are not the light. He says, but he came to bear witness to that light. And so we too should come to bear witness to that light. But we are not the light. And so John's humility is on display here for all of us. And like I said, we're talking about John, but in essence, we're really talking about us. You know, this is a very peculiar sermon because I'm speaking about John, but I'm also speaking to myself. And so, beloved, this month, as we spend time with John, let us reflect on the integrity of this individual. And let me be honest with you, when you stand in your integrity as a Christian, you are going to get a little bit of pushback. It's going to happen. Whenever you stand for what thus saith the Lord, it is a natural occurrence to get pushed back. Why, you may say? I'll just utilize myself. Because truth makes you uncomfortable. Truth means you have to change. Truth means you have to adjust. Truth means the status quo is no longer acceptable. And just like the unbelievers, it makes us uncomfortable. But it is the only way that we can progress. It is the only way that we can move forward. I was telling that young man that you can change the world. And he says there's no way. This is how despondent he had gotten. I told him you can change the world one person at a time. I said, but it has to stop with you. And don't let that complacency or that pessimism come into the church. Because all of us, like John, have been called to testify to the light. And all of us are lights. And so I concede to you that the world at times can be a very dark place. But Christ has given you light. And we are to share that light with one another. And so any dark room changes as soon as light comes in. And am I right about it? Yeah. And so just with what we have here, we can make an impact. We just have to be lights. And I'm not going to lie to you. It's going to cost you something. It's going to cost you time, talent, and treasure. And sometimes for making a stand, you might get ostracized, but you don't quit. And so we got a couple of more sessions to spend with John. But if you want a role model, there he is. I was looking for an excuse early on in my ministry. I was looking for an excuse until I realized that all the people that have gone on before me were human just like I was. And then sometimes Maurice, you think you can't make an impact. But you can make an impact. Look at all the people's lives that have changed because of 12 men. Your life, my life, has been changed because of the impact of 12 men that made a decision to testify to that light. And I'm pretty sure that there were days when they thought that they weren't making an impact. But their impact, like ripples in the water, continues even on to this day. Somebody somewhere today is being saved because of the testimony of those 12. Am I right about it? So don't ever underestimate the power of your testimony. Don't ever underestimate the power that you can have in someone's life. I won't be able to reach everyone. I know that. But you can go places that I can't go. You can talk to people that I can't talk to. All of us have a sphere of influence. I guess all I'm saying is bring your light. And don't let this world think that you can't make an impact. You don't need a title to make an impact. You just need to have a conviction. You just need to have integrity as to who you say you are. And let me tell you something else in closing about the world. Newsflash. And you even find this sometimes in the church. People don't like integrity. Because the integrity will convict you. But it will keep you on the straight and narrow, but it will convict you. And so, I close. Because I know we got a busy day. We got a meeting right after this. But would you just do me a favor today? As you leave here today, sometime during your week, would you consider John? Would you just give him a thought? Give him some space in your week? Would you just consider John? Because out of the spirit of reciprocity, John considered us. God bless you, Springfield. I'm going to close with that. Just give it a thought. Our closing song is How Great Thou Art. We will sing verses 1 through 4. How great